on a sunny day, at least it is for the moment. Let me start by saying I'm a Glasgow man, Glasgow East Ender, and I'm a lifelong Herald reader, literally lifelong. The Herald was in my house as long as I can remember. And I read it when it was the Glasgow Herald, a great provincial newspaper, and have stayed with it throughout all its incarnations since then. And I've been a subscriber of the Herald for some years. But as anybody who read my blogs or looked at my Twitter feed knows, I'm deeply sceptical and frankly baffled at times by some aspects of the Herald. Something happened to the Herald along the way, and with it something happened to Neil Mackay. Neil's background, impeccable background as a journalist, is in part goes back to his native land, Northern Ireland. And he was formed very significantly by his experiences and, from what he's revealed on occasion, very difficult personal experiences of the period of the Troubles. And that would influence anybody's views of politics. We're all influenced by our early lives and shaped by them in ways we don't wholly control. But Neil Mackay's journalism and the Herald's position on independence has baffled me in recent years. And I would now categorise it reasonably confidently, whatever it says about its objectivity on the constitutional question, as a unionist supporting paper, an anti-independence paper, and a Labour supporting paper. Now I think that the Herald would be, as it stands at the moment, would be comfortable with a higher degree of devolution, perhaps even something approaching federalism, but it squarely, I think, operates within a unionist mindset. I think to some degree they outsourced their independence consciousness and a part of their objectivity, and that may be unfair to Johnson Press and to the Herald and to its present journalists, but that's how, as a long-term and loyal, a word I'm not fond of, loyal reader of the Herald. So Neil, to me, has lost his way. I can't really fix where he's at, what he's about. I mean, I wish him well. I have no animosity towards him whatsoever. I've never met the man. And I believe he is a man of genuine belief and genuine conviction. I just wish to hell I knew exactly where these convictions were rooted. But today he has an article which is certainly worthy of close scrutiny by unionists and nationalists alike. And there it is. Starmer has handed the next election to the SNP. Now, anybody that's followed recent events would know that, when was it? Sunday before last Sunday, Keir Starmer, on an ill-advised visit to Scotland, decided to be interviewed by Scotland Today, the Scottish half hour that we have tacked on at the end of the Koonsberg show. And it has a very, very able journalist, experienced journalist and interviewer in Martin Geisler. Martin Geisler, in many ways, in my view, is an object lesson to other interviewers and political presenters and analysts in how to do it and how to do it right. And by any objective standards, and many desperate attempts to deny this, Martin Geisler simply disassembled Keir Starmer piece by piece on his opposition to the Scottish independence referendum. I mean, he left him looking weak, evasive, contradictory, and very badly informed about the true nature of the constitutional debate as it relates to the whole Westminster political structure. And my judgment from it was it showed him to be unfit to be a UK PM, and in fact unfit in any sense to be a Labour leader, with all that that implies of conviction, values, history, direction, etc. But there we are. So there's that. Neil today goes into an area that interests me deeply, and that is what exactly was the nature of the Labour collapse in Scotland? Why exactly did it gravitate to the SNP, who'd been labouring away manfully and womanfully since 1934 or whatever, and suddenly independence was credibly on the horizon, led by a very charismatic and adroit political leader, Alex Salmond. There are many views of that. Anyway, Neil today comes up with some very important statements. Starmer is so out of touch in Scotland, so enthralled to an England. I've corrected, Neil, your enthrall, I think was a typo or a misjudgment. So enthralled to an England only perspective that he deserves the thumping he's going to get up here to come in the general election. The tragedy is that his folly puts in jeopardy the hope of kicking out the Conservatives. And I would agree with that. But the area that Neil is clearly uneasy with is that what that has also delivered to the independence movement and the SNP is a golden apple. That the response, my typical response in terms of impressions to my tweets is moderate to low, I would describe it. I get between 80, sometimes a couple of hundred impressions on a tweet, and I manage to usually average an engagement rate of 2.5%, which most advertisers would be quite happy with. On the two tweets and the clip of the broadcast that I put up on the interview of Starmer by Martin Geisler, I had 56,000 impressions and a massive amount of involvement on my Twitter feed and by various other contacts, by email, by direct contact. It made a huge impact. So I think to some degree Neil underrates all that. But here's another statement by Neil, very penetrating one, and it actually describes my crucial mover from being a lifelong, born into a Labour supporting family, campaigning for Labour as a 10-year-old on the ILP to be exact, in the 1945 general election, through voting for Labour all my life with one mad aberration at the early formation of the Lib Dems, which I hastily abandoned after about 3 weeks, and after I met David Owen, which would put me off almost politics for life. The harsh truth for both Labour and the SNP is that nationalists wouldn't be in power if it wasn't for Blair. He gifted Alex Salmond power in 2007, and the SNP expertly consolidated that position. Now, that's true in a significant part for a lot of people. There were many other factors. There was unease about the Labour in Scotland, where your average Labour MP's main ambition seemed to be to scamper off as soon as possible to the high road to England from Scottish politics, and ideally out of democratic politics by having a nice, comfortable little lordship, which some of them achieved. Along the way, the sheer venality, incompetence, ineptness, petty Tammany Hall type politics of Labour left a great many people, including me, with a deep distaste in their mouths for that. Now, the SNP isn't perfect. And the SNP may not. I think, in fact, it's unlikely to be the government of an independent Scotland other than in a transitional period, because I think the true nature of proportional representation and the D'Hondt version of it will come to fruition. We'll probably have some kind of coalition government when we do elect our new independent Scottish Parliament. And whether that's a bad thing or a good thing, I think it's a good thing. I think it's probably going to happen. Neil goes on to talk, and really the whole force of his article was very trenchant and pertinent observations like, but Starmer cares about England. Scotland, like Scottish Labour, is an addendum for him. Unfortunately, that describes the total attitude of Westminster, England, and the Union to Scotland. It's an addendum, and we're not an addendum. I'm not a citizen of an addendum, and I have no intention in what's left of a long life to be treated as an addendum to anything. I'm an independent Scot. So a lot of Neil's feel in the article is of deep regret that Labour lost this position, and it's the position of what I call the Labour nostalgic. Somebody who has a sort of semi-romantic or airy-fairy commitment to Scottish independence, but doesn't like the practicalities of getting there, doesn't like the SNP for a variety of reasons, and focuses their attention and sometimes, frankly, their bile on the SNP. I think Neil marginally comes into that category, and so does Kevin McKenna, another fine journalist that I admired in his days when he wrote for the Guardian, a Scot undoubtedly, who says he's committed to independence, but again comes through to me as a Labour nostalgic. I can say that because there is an element of the Labour nostalgic in me. I think in any old Labour man or woman like me, there's that feeling, I wish I could get back to these days when we knew where the right was and where our heart was, and that was on the left, and that the left meant Labour. Well, my God, we've travelled a long way from that, and there's no road back. At the moment, my heart and head are not wholly with the SNP as a political party, but I definitely think they are the best option on offer. I admire Nicola Sturgeon in many, many aspects. I've worries about her willingness to take the necessary risks and steps. I think she's been a hugely effective politician at maintaining the SNP vote, building the SNP vote, with enormous help, which at times, frankly, the SNP hasn't deserved from a yes movement that it's underappreciated, but nonetheless managed to give us a succession of governments. And they are the only political vehicle, the only credible political vehicle for delivering independence. So I say to Neil Mackay and Kevin McKenna and those like him, including myself, yes, think of Labour, Scottish Labour, as a long departed and much loved relatives, and the relatives that followed weren't too great. And there's never going to be a comeback. Let's focus on the SNP, imperfect as it is, give it our backing, be constructively critical as a friend is critical, but not destructively critical and abusively critical. So that's my view, guys. I hope I haven't insulted you, because I have a considerable measure of respect for both of you and for the Herald and for some of the things it's done and for its contributors and for what still remains the jewel in the crown of the Herald, for real debate ranging from the ridiculous to the finely judged and perfectly aimed the letters column of the Herald. Still think you'll find more sense in the letters column of the Herald than you do in a lot of its journalism, in a lot of Scottish journalism, and a better balance than in any other British newspaper of opinion. So to letters editors, old and new, my deep and fervent thanks. Bye.